Hi there. In today's lesson we're going to look at equivalent fractions and simplifying fractions. To start with, let's look at equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions are two or more fractions which have the same value but using different digits. We get these equivalent fractions by making sure that the numerator and the denominator are multiplied or divided by the same value to get from one fraction to the next. Let's take a look at an example. Here I have 4 examples of different levels of difficulty. Let's start with the easiest, which is the red example. The first fraction we have here is 1/4, which is a quarter. And I'm asked what this is equivalent to if 3 is on the numerator. I first need to think about how I get from 1 to 3 using multiplication or division. What do I times 1 by to get to 3? Yeah, I times by 3. So I'm going to write that as an instruction on the top. The rule with fractions is whatever I do to the top, I must do to the bottom as well. So if I've done 1 times 3 to make 3 on the top, I must do 4 times 3 to get my answer on the bottom. What is 4 times 3? Use your times tables grid if you don't know. What is 4 times 3? That's correct. The answer is 12. So that is my numerator and denominator, 3/12. That means that the fraction 1/4 or 1/4 is the same as 3/12. They are equivalent fractions. Let's have a look at the second example, orange. In this example, the numerator is missing on the right-hand side. We have the fraction 2/7. If we look at the denominators, I can see that we have 7 changing into 14. What do I multiply 7 by to get the answer 14? Use your times table grid if you are not sure. What do I times 7 by to get to 14? That's correct. I times it by 2. 7 times 2 is 14. Whatever I do to the denominator, I must also do to the numerator. So 7 times 2 gives me 14. I need to do 2 times 2 on the top. What is 2 times 2? If you're not sure, use your times table grid. What is 2 times 2? Correct, 4. So 4 is my missing numerator. That means that the fraction 2/7 is equivalent to the fraction 4/14. They are the same fraction but written using different digits. Let's have a look at example number 3. These are slightly harder as we are working backwards. We are missing the first fraction rather than the second. In this question, rather than looking how I make it to get from 3 to 9, I'm going to work backwards and say, how do I get from 9 back to 3? I can only use multiplication or division. How do I get from 9 to 3? I divide by 3, correct. And that is going in the opposite direction. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And whatever I do to the top, I must also do to the bottom. So 15 divided by 3. Remember to use your times table grid if you are not sure of the answer. What is 15 divided by 3? Correct, it is 5. So the fraction 3/5 or 3/5 is equivalent to 9/15. 3/5 and 9/15 are the same fraction but using different digits. Our final example. Again, I must work backwards as I have the second fraction rather than the first. How do I get from 16 back to 4? I'm going smaller, so I must be dividing. Use your times table grid to find 16 divided by what gets me back to the answer 4. That's right, I'm dividing by 4. 16 divided by 4 gives me 4. I must do the same to the top as I've done to the bottom. So I'm going to do 4 divided by 4. Use your times table grid to help you find what is 4 divided by 4. Correct. The answer is 1. The red and the amber questions are much easier because they are getting larger and they are multiplying. This green and blue question at the bottom are more difficult because they require division, but if you use your times table grid in your planner, you should be able to have a go at these questions. Have a look in Google Classroom in the classwork section for Task 1 Equivalent Fractions. Pause this video and have a go at those questions. Now we've had a look at equivalent fractions, we also need to look at how we simplify fractions. You might want to write this down somewhere because you need to remember it. To simplify a fraction, we must divide the numerator, the number on the top, and the denominator, the number on the bottom, by the same number. We must try to find the largest number that we can. Sometimes we can divide more than once, and we're going to have a look at some examples of how to do this. Here I have 3 fractions. Our first one is 8/10. My instructions said that we must divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number. If I look at my fraction 8/10, I know from my lesson on multiples that they are both in the 2 times table. So I can divide the top numerator and the bottom denominator by 2. What is 8 divided by 2? Well done. 8 divided by 2 is 4. What is 10 divided by 2? Correct, it is 5. So my fraction is 4/5. These are equivalent fractions like we looked at in the first half of the lesson, but this is 8/10 in its simplest form. I cannot divide 4 and 5 by the same number. So this is its simplest form. Let's have a look at the second example, 4/12. Again, I know from our work on multiples that these are both in the 2 times table, so I can divide 4 by 2 and I can divide 12 by 2. What is 4 divided by 2? Correct, 4 divided by 2 is 2. Well done. What is 12 divided by 2? Yes, 12 divided by 2 is 6. So I know that 2/6 is a simplified version of the fraction 4/12. However, This question is slightly trickier because 2 and 6 are still both in the 2 times table. So I can divide by 2 again. I can do 2 divided by 2, and I can do 6 divided by 2. What is 2 divided by 2? Yes, 2 divided by 2 is 1. What is 6 divided by 2? Correct. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So I now have a more simplified fraction of 4 over 12. I divided by 2 to get 2 over 6, but then I could divide by 2 again to get 1 over 3. So 1 over 3 is in its simplest form. 2 over 6 is not the final answer and will not get you the mark. Let's take a look at our final example. 18 and 30 are both in the 2 times table, so I'm going to divide 18 by 2 and I'm going to divide 30 by 2. What is 18 divided 2? Lovely. 18 divided by 2 is 9. What is 30 divided by 2? This one won't be on your multiplication grid because it's too large a number. So you need to use a bit of thinking power and see if you can divide by 2. So halve 30. Well done. 30 divided by 2 is 15. Now in our previous example we could divide by 2 again, but I know from my rules of multiples that 9 and 15 are not in the 2 times table. But wait, they are both in the 3 times table. So for this one I can divide again, but I can divide by 3. Be careful, I don't always divide by 2. Sometimes I can divide by 3 or 4 or 5 or more. Dividing by 2 is the easiest, but not always the answer. I cannot have a decimal answer on my fraction. If I divide 9 by 2, I get 4.5. I can't have that on a fraction. What is 9 divided by 3? Excellent. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And finally, what is 15 divided by 3? Fantastic. 15 divided by 3 is 5. And finally, I've got my fraction in its simplest form. 18 over 30, I can simplify to 9 over 15, but that is not my final answer because I must divide again to get 3 over 5. I would suggest you write out those examples. You might want to pause the video so you've got these to refer back to when you do some questions. So your second and final task this week is called Task 2, Simplifying Fractions. And this is again in the classwork section of Google Classroom. Have a go at the questions. They've got different scores depending on how easy or difficult the simplification is. If it's worth more marks, it's going to be more like an amber or a green question. Have a go at both of these tasks before 3 o'clock on Friday, and I'll have a look at how you've got on before next week's lesson. Any problems, send me a message.